would leave less money in the pocket. Yeah.
Good morning. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I really needed this. Okay. Good morning. This is a work session, so we won't be taking any action on anything, and we have one big idea, which is our legislative update from our lobbyists from the great session of 2025. So, Tony, why don't you come on up?
Probably at the podium is better, Tony.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity. My name, for the record, is Tony Albright. I represent Paul Haas, and on behalf of Carver County at the legislature, and I'm joined today by Courtney Jasper, another one of our teammates, and she'll also be covering some of the priorities that were set forth in 2025 by you for our work and endeavors. I'm going to give you just a little brief overview of the session. I know that there is a lot to cover in 2025. A lot of it we've already dealt with in terms of where we are today, but I do want to just update you with some of the finer points of the end of session, as well as the special session and some of the events that lead us here this morning. To say that the session started smoothly was uncharacteristic. We had a tied House, a tied Senate, and through a number of seats filled, we came to a working session where we had a tied House and a one-seat majority in the Senate, led by a majority by the Democrats. We're faced at the time with about a $6 billion deficit. Much of that was in the 28-29 biennium, but nonetheless, based upon Constitution, we need to provide for a balanced budget to the governor for his signature. A lot of work occurred during that time as the session wore on. At the end of session, there were a few committee budget bills that were passed and signed into law, but a lot of them were left undone. With the end of session, we moved into the instruction of those conference committees to formulate and meet as quickly as possible under the working group provisions to complete their work and prepare for a special session. That special session was held on June 9th. And the House took care of business quite methodically in the space of about 14, 15 hours. The Senate took a little longer. They finished at 2 a.m. on the following day. With that being said, we moved into the interim, which we thought was going to be preparation for the 2026 session. And unfortunately, on June 14th, tragedy struck this state in a way that was inconceivable and without measure, with the assassination of Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman, as well as her husband Mark, and the attempted murder of both Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette, as well as their daughter. I can happily report, and for the sake of the Hoffmans, that Senator Hoffman is out of the hospital. He's recuperating at home, and he's looking forward to the 2026 session. We also had a number of other occurrences, and I'll just mention them briefly for your benefit. Senator Nicole Mitchell did stand trial last week for the indictment against her for attempted burglary charges. That case was given to the jury on Friday of last, and they returned a verdict of guilty on both counts. She is due to be sentenced at some time. I don't know the date right now, but she has also tendered a letter of resignation pursuant to completion of, I think, 3 or 4 provisions in that, and those are intended to be completed by August 4th of this year. There is a special election that the governor has established for the seat in 34B, which is the Hortman seat. The primary is on August 12th, with the election itself on September 16th. I'm sad to report also that yesterday Senator Bruce Anderson passed, and so there will be a need for a Senate special election to fulfill that seat with his passing. He represented the Buffalo area. And some, as Commissioner Workman remarked, knew him quite well. And so please keep his family in your prayers. Looking ahead, we also have then the special election for the Nicole Mitchell seat out in the Woodbury area. The special election provisions for that seat for both the primary and for the general election have yet to be announced by the governor, but we anticipate those to happen soon. Senator Omar Fatah won the primary for the mayoralship of Minneapolis. If his campaign is successful for mayor on November 4th of 2025, there will also be a need for a special election for his seat as well. And so you can see a number of new faces that will be resident on 2026 for the second year of the biennium, which starts on February 17th of next year. I'm just going to go briefly, I know the time is pressing us, into some of the priorities that your council and your staff put together. And first and foremost, we talked about the unfunded state and federal mandates. With a $6 billion budget deficit, much of that, in terms of where the legislature put their emphasis, was using the tool to reach, a balanced budget by shifting those costs to the counties. I can say that, that happened in almost nearly every area of the state budget, particularly in transportation and human services. By the efforts of your counties association, as well as the individual members, I can happily report to you that much of the intrusion on your budgets, particularly in the transportation area, were fended off. The cost shifts were reduced in the areas of the human services. They were initially proposed for waiver rate exemption. In particular, the governor's budget also proposed a 5% residential services cost shift. I can say that we have more work to do in the healthcare area, because I do believe that those are temporary wins. With the policy year coming up, they will attempt to in order to balance the outlying years, another run at seeing how they can move those costs, if you will, to the counties themselves. There was an outcome from that session. The legislature actually established a long-term services and supports advisory council, which is going to be looking at cost savings through future reforms, particularly in the area of health and human services. In addition, if that is not found at the state level, I think you have been made aware of the fact that there is a cost shift of up to probably $90 million for the county residential services alone. Moving to earned sick and safe, as well as the paid family medical leave. We've talked about them on a number of occasions before you. Significant, we were looking for and hoping that there might be some modifications to the ESST. There are a number of significant administrative and operational burdens that now have been placed on employers, which will obviously compound staffing challenges. The legislature did adopt a number of modifications to the law. You can now establish reasonable notification policies for unforeseeable use. You can also ask for documentation for 2 consecutive days reduced from 3 days. It also, new law clarifies that employees may voluntarily trade shifts while using ESST, and the employers using projected accruals must reconcile with actual hours worked. On the paid family and medical leave, not as much modifications. The only change made to the program, which takes effect on January 1st of 2026, was that there was a reduction in the annual premium cap from 1.2% to 1.1% of taxable wages. I will note for those in the room that this is a program that also requires a very substantial software program to be established and up and running. I understand that that is still in the works, and from some of the legislatures that are more learned on the tech side than I am, there may be some worry about whether or not that is ready for implementation in a timely manner. Going on to housing and the initiatives there, we spent a lot of time in this legislature past session talking about housing of all types. Obviously, your priorities are for providing a broad spectrum of housing, whether it be affordable, condominiums for retired to transition people for looking for what is a demographic, particularly in the graying population, moving out of those homes so young family formations can take on those opportunities in larger homes. There was a request made for a greater local control for those housing needs. And in the end, there really wasn't much done on the housing front, except for that in the cash bonding bill, a little over $2.4 million was appropriated for local public housing programs. In addition, LAHA, there was a modification to LAHA for the benefit of viewers. That's the Local Affordable Housing Aid Program. Was modified slightly to require that funds distributed under LAHA would be used for a qualifying project. When we talk about greenhouse gas emissions and the miles traveled, we have had talked about that on a number of occasions, and thanks to Lyndon for his work on that program. In years past, we did move it from a project-based assessment to a portfolio for the state. In addition to that, we did have some success in terms of making some different allowances for investments to qualify as offsets to greenhouse gas emissions. I'll just go through those very briefly. You can now use offsets such as for ecosystem restoration, afforestation, and as a definition there, I had to look it up as well, again, just to make sure, but afforestation is actually the process of putting and establishing a forest where there was none. And this is actually for the opportunity for carbon sequestration, which is a large part of the GHG initiative. You can also offset those by wetland conservation, restorative agricultural practices, as well as land acquisition that includes easements, restoration, and enhancements for outdoor recreation systems and state parks. I want to touch just briefly on the regional park system and how that occurred during the course of the session. Was very different in terms of how those bonding bills were put together from years past. It did not, which in the past have included nonprofit entities and local projects. This bill this year only included state projects. And so in the final bill, there was $16 million for the Met Council, $1 million for a community tree planting, but there was no inclusion for resources for the regional park system. Parks and Trails in the Legacy Fund, as a reminder, it's a 40-40-20 split between the Department of Revenue, the Met Council, and then the Regional Park and Trail System. House File 14 made an amendment to, excuse me, I'm going to back up just a second, because one of the provisos that we worked on in the transportation area, which Lyndon, I will give great credit to him for, in the transportation issue is, in the bonding bill a couple of years ago, we were fortunate to have appropriated money for Trunk Highway 5, but there was an understanding that there was an opportunity to expand the usage of that money for a much longer stretch of that road. We were successful in putting that into the bill, and so now that Trunk Highway 5 will be extended, and thanks to Lyndon for his help in putting that language together. It came together quite nicely, and thanks to the the leads on the Transportation Committee, particularly Cosnick and others. With that, just conclude with the Met Council did receive $24 million in fiscal '26 for Parks and Trails and $27.2 for fiscal '27 to fund projects approved by the elected representatives of each of the Metropolitan Parks implementing agencies. With that, there are several still remaining priorities that we worked on and we'd like to report on, and with that, I will bring up Courtney Jasper to remark on those.
Thank you. Great to see you all. Courtney Jasper with Polhaus. I've got just a couple left in the health and human services space. I know an issue that's very important to Carver County and that you all have spent some time working on is related to the 48-hour rule. 48-hour rule, as you all know, deals with individuals who have been civilly committed, who have not been necessarily found guilty of a crime, but are sitting in your jails while they're awaiting movement to a place where they can be properly treated. That took up a significant amount of time and energy talking about the 48-hour rule in the Health and Human Services committees in both the House and the Senate. There was a coalition that was, we called it the County Coalition. It was AMC, MAXA, the County Attorneys Association, and the sheriffs. And really that group worked as a block to say, hey, we can't leave counties high and dry here. We can't do another 2-year pause on the 48-hour rule where there's no opportunity for lawsuits or really any mechanisms to move folks forward without some sort of increase in capacity and helping counties with the does not meet criteria funding. In the end, the counties looked at the larger picture of how they were getting hit really hard in the human services area, and Heather was a phenomenal advocate at the Capitol. I just want to point that out, not only because she's in the room, but because she was really, really quite effective in talking to folks, and she showed up and she'd sit and pull folks off the floor, and not everybody will do that. So I want to recognize that. But at the end of the day, in the 48-hour rule space that does not meet criteria funding, that 2-year pause ended. And so July 1st, 2025, those dollars, again, are something that the counties are going to be charged for. There was some progress in the 48-hour rule space. There was $75 million set aside in the bonding bill to demolish and rebuild the Miller Building on the AMRTC, the Anoka Metro Regional Treatment Center site. And so it's going to take a couple of years, but that is going to open up 55 more beds, which I know $75 million for 55 beds doesn't sound like a great investment, but it is really significant, and that is going to help move folks along the system. So that's where things landed on the 48-hour rule and does not meet criteria space. Another issue that we were working on in the human services space was in the child protection and justice involved youth area. There was a county coalition bill that was all of the metro counties and Olmsted County working together on 4 initiatives related to waivers, related to finding placements for youth. And it had a lot of really good conversations. At the end of the day, that did not move forward because of the financial costs. There was a lot of support for it. It was a really positive conversation, but it's very expensive to build up these facilities. And so that's something that is going to continue to be a conversation in the coming years. Min choices, that was another priority for Carver County. There was a change this year to allow for verbal attestation if there hasn't been any changes made in, or if there isn't any changes over the year, rather than having to do an assessment. Unfortunately, though, with that change, they also changed the reimbursement structure for min choices to a flat reimbursement rate. So that is more expensive for the counties. So you get a little something here, but you get something over there. Last thing, in the child protection space, two things worth noting. Minnesota African American Family Preservation Act. I know that there are a lot of counties that, as we're preparing for implementation of that, there are some concerns about what the cost is going to be of those investments that are going to be required of counties further down the line to help try to keep families together and give them the resources to stay together. So the individuals who brought forward that bill and passed the bill over the last couple of years, Senator Champion and Representative Agbaje actually introduced a bill to recognize we understand that there's going to be a need for additional funding, and if we're going to have this program move forward and move forward well, we're going to need to bring money forward. Unfortunately, that bill was introduced pretty late, but it is still at play for next session. So there may be an opportunity prior to full implementation of the Minnesota African American Family Preservation Act. It's a bit of a mouthful to be able to get some additional funding to counties to make sure that that program, once launched, goes well. One positive note in that space is the SSIS program, which I know folks are familiar with, which really helps our social service workers and caseworkers to be able to easily pull up data, and has been a bit of a dinosaur over the past couple of years. There was $35 million put forward to modernize that program to help social service workers to get the resources needed and to be able to understand the full case that is in front of them. I know that's a lot between Tony and I, but happy to take any questions if any of the commissioners have any questions. It was a very unique session, as you know.
Well, seeing no questions. Anybody got a question? It is a mouthful.
I'm happy to go. Thanks for being here. I think we get good value from both of you, right? And Tony, your time at the legislature, you bring a different perspective, so I think we're getting good value. Tom and I have had the chance to serve on the Legislative Priorities Committee, so we have more knowledge of your participation and activity there, and respect from both sides of the aisle at the Capitol in a really hard time. I know that our time is spent partially on defensive measures. Seems like there's a lot of defense being played this year. I guess I'm more interested on the offensive side as we look forward to next year and next session, and not just next session, but the next handful of sessions, because I know at the state and the federal level, the impacts aren't contained nicely within 1 year, budget, for example. And so some of my questions are along those lines. The first one is I know that we have contested elections in Carver County, are anticipating that, very close margins, and then our partners in Scott County as well. I think the two tightest races were in Scott and Carver County. And it's not lost on me how tight it is, and it might flip one way or the other in the next 18 to 36 months. Mm-hmm. Are there things that we should be thinking about or hearing as a board that you guys hear in the halls of the Capitol that we can work on in a bipartisan way versus, beating each other up? And I know sometimes it's hard because, you come from a political persuasion, but you've done a good job of staying neutral. Where are the areas where we can actually make strides at the Capitol from your perspective as a lobbyist that's spending time with our peers across multiple counties?
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and then can certainly toss it to Tony. I think the reality is in our current legislative makeup, which Tony talked about, contingent. There's opportunities for a couple different special elections here. In order to be successful with anything, we have to be bipartisan. And so we spent a lot of time over the past year on some difficult issues. These human services issues that I touched on right towards the end, they're difficult, but they're things that for counties, whether if you're in Rock County or Carver County or Ramsey County, they're a big deal. And so we spent time talking to bipartisan members. I think from the county perspective, you can expect that as the state continues to look at a deficit in the coming years, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to come forward. And I was talking to Heather before we started. If we have ideas on how to fix some of these things and where cuts might make sense, and they need to hear that, and they're asking to hear that. And I know that there are some work groups that are starting up in different spaces where there are going to be opportunities for Carver County to be front and center and to say, hey, we think that you should do X, or we think you should do Y, because the state's looking to solutions. And the human service, I've just got my human services hat on right now. At the end of session, when they had that work group and they rolled out, here's our final bill, best of luck. The thing that they kept saying is, counties, we're helping you out now, but we need your help in the future. And so they put together that working group to try to figure out a way to cut costs in the future. And they're saying, we don't know the solutions, and the counties are on the front line. And so we're really going to have that opportunity to be thoughtful and collaborative and to come forward to the legislature with a solution. And whatever we come forward with, if we'd like it to pass, we're going to need Democrats and Republicans to raise their hand and say, I support this. I don't know, Tony, if you have more specifics.
And I think Courtney really was spot on in terms of assessment. I'm going to pull back a little bit to the 40,000 foot mark, and just give you kind of to your point, Commissioner, the overarching theme that I think is the state is really looking for the confidence in their election system And that being said, there's a lot of, misinformation out there in terms of the accuracy and what went on, that type of thing. But putting that aside, I think what this state is looking for in future elections is authenticity. Authenticity from their candidates. We are so bipolar right now, or excuse me, we are so polarized right now. Some of us are bipolar.
might be bipolar,
We
too.
could be bipolar. But the polarization of both the parties, and I heard some current candidates yesterday talk about waxing quite well, I thought, in terms of that people are looking for transparency and authenticity in the election results, but also in their candidates that come forward. I think that the circumstances, particularly as I'm familiar with in Scott County, with the election results from 54A down there, certainly there were some errors made. I think that the correction on those certainly makes for a better outcome in future, but time will tell. But I do think that in what Courtney was talking about, we are in unlike any other territory in terms of a very, very evenly split electorate and a very, very evenly split legislature, and it's not going away anytime soon. And so these members are going to have to figure out how to be and take risks, quite honestly, in terms of to find common ground on some really, really large issues. We face a declining capability in our health system. We find a declining ability for our education system to support a robust, outcome for our students. We talk about a transportation system on a regular basis in terms of the services, not only for, road miles traveled with you being able to drive, but also for those that are, shut-ins and looking for mass transit and transit opportunities to get around. There are some really, really large issues that I think membership in, to your point, Commissioner, in subsequent biennia are needing to find the courage to reach across the aisle. I know that's, a bit, old in terms of trite, but really to find some better solutions for some really large issues. And it's complicated based upon what just happened on July 4th with the big, beautiful bill, which is now the big, beautiful law, and how that impacts counties, how that impacts cities. So I think we've got a lot of work to do, and your advocacy as commissioner groups, whether it be AMC and others or in individuals meeting with your legislators, is imperative to get that message across and educate them and really empower them to do, for us all to do better.
Good. A couple more points, and I want to pile on that one because I don't know if we would put a value amount in the first thing that you updated us on is the effectiveness. Commissioner Workman was one of the leads of that when it came to, I think it was $5 to $6, $7 million relief on our budget from what the initial Walls bill was to be had to shift to the county, at least for this year. And that doesn't mean it's not going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
But that's important. I think the one thing that we talked about regular ad nauseum was more beds. And so on a per bed basis, that's expensive. But Anoka County took that on. And I think the lawmaker in Scott County helped lead the charge for the funding and to get that done. And Anoka's a great place for it. It's a lot different than having people go to other states and not be close to friends and family when they're going through some challenges. The other hot topics that have seemed to take on more of a bipartisan characteristic, maybe not the funding mechanisms, but the spirit of it is housing and mental health. And so mental health doesn't go away, but if we pick our shots, if you will, we can move upstream and do more things. I think beds is part of that calculus and also the investment to be had. As it relates to housing, I know that this has been a football and it's not going away. Right. I know that there's bills that were even our local lawmakers authored or signed on and then backed off on. And it's a hot topic. When I have conversations, and I was out of state having conversations too in state, it seems to be a hot topic that nestles down, at least for people that I talk to in Carver County. How do we deliver a $300,000 affordable product with minimal or no subsidy? And I think there's a path to do that. And I think even at a county level, there's a path to do that by zoning, by loosening different things, by looking at having a substantive conversation. Is there a way for us to be in the room having conversations with the lawmakers that can make that happen? Or is the sausage being made and it's all political versus like, let's get to a pragmatic solution? We've passed it along too long.
That is the answer to that one, is in the ether, so to say. But I will say, Commissioner, that after 2 years of really trying to come to some type of, and I wouldn't say compromise, but reconciliation of differences around removal of local control and handing it over or relegating it to state agencies or state regulations. I think that the advocates on all sides are starting to really realize in a true sense that over the interim, and we are working on this, that the components of a better housing strategy are there. It's just a matter of both sides meeting closer in the middle. For the first time, I think they recognize that everyone needs to work on it sooner rather than just after the first of the year. And we can't work on it in vacuums aside from ourselves. And we can't be the, if you're the commissions, if you're the counties or the municipalities, you can't always say no. There are things, to your point, that I think cities and counties, particularly cities, would be happy to embrace. But there are still some issues that just don't make sense based upon the practicality of what they're asking a city to do. But yet, that's where the education and the mentorship, if you will, of these members, both in the House and Senate, to appreciate the perspective that a city comes from in terms of zoning, in terms of the planning, in terms of the responsibility and obligations to a long-range plan that the Met Council is working on. And so there are a number of factors that come into this. Do I think it's going to be a one and done? No. These are coalitions that will continually work towards a betterment of this over years to come. But there are some foundational elements, I think, that were at least relationships that were established over the last 2 years that we can build upon. And I'll come back to the earliest point. Advocacy on the part of cities, individually members or as groups with their elected membership to the legislature is imperative to have them not change their mind, but just appreciate what is at stake in terms of local planning and control, which is at the heart of making sure that cities are viable and thriving in the years to come.
Two last things, and they're more comments than anything else as we look at next year, what our priorities will be. Will we reaffirm the ones we already have? Will we readjust? Will we add and subtract? But it came up in workforce. Commissioner Anderson, myself, and Director Goodwin were together, and the question popped up is, what are we willing to subsidize to deliver services for our county? And we're proud that we have elevated levels of service here. But these become really difficult decisions as we're talking about budget this year, next year, the year after, and the year after that. And so in that regard, the DMV is something that the state doesn't require us to do, but we heavily subsidize it. When I came in, I think we were at a break-even proposition. Years previously, we were making money. This year, it looks like a significant loss, and that's not even including capital expenditures. So I offer that as we're talking about the shifts. This is one of those shifts. Even with the change of the funding, I see you nodding, so you get it. And it's a popular service, no doubt about it. We serve about 70% of the people that come through our DMVs are not residents of Carver County. So we're double subsidizing this. And so those are hard conversations for sure when they're a beloved service, but it's another shift that the government makes. And they even updated our reimbursements that haven't kept pace with the cost that we have associated. And the last one, when it comes to, I said when I started, is offensively. It's concerning, but there's also relief to be had when we talk about 2050 comp planning. I was with Met Council about a month ago, and I said, if we had added 3,500 households to the eastern part of the county, would that tip us over from a sewer capacity standpoint? And the answer was yes, or close there too. This is a thing. It's not just one community that's just announced they're going to build 2,500 houses. It's 7 areas throughout the county that I think that there's an opportunity, Tony, to lean on your expertise, yours as well, at the Capitol to say, how can we, instead of onesie twosie and wait 15 years for money to be had there, how can we use the 2050 comp planning to talk about these real issues, especially in a growth county? We're the fastest growing county in the state, but some of those pinch points are real that we can do something about in the short term. So thanks for being here again. I think we're getting great value out of you guys.
Appreciate your comments, Commissioner.
All right, Commissioner Anderson.
So thank you for being here, and thank you for all the work that you're doing. I kind of want to look forward to next year. And I think one of the things I've learned in my now 6 months on the board is the importance of our relationships with our legislatures. And this is it was a good time for me to join the board as the everybody's really fond of shifting costs onto the county, so I'm enjoying that. I thought non-funded mandates just existed in the school board world. Now I know they're everywhere. Can you give us a to-do list on how we as elected officials can spend our time before the next session to kind of try and educate ourselves, educate our community, build relationships with legislatures? What would you recommend?
You know, I will draw from experience in terms of when I was in the legislature, and I think some of the most meaningful conversations I had were quite literally, and I know it's cliche-ish to say, but, you know, sitting down over a cup of coffee and really have some vague idea in terms of an agenda, but find out, quite honestly, what they're going to be working on. And that speaks to what Commissioner Uderman was relevant to in terms of, are we going to be defense or how can we play offense? But to the point of, the relationships are imperative.
Absolutely.
And I know that, you know, there may be differences upon amongst anyone in terms of how to get to the end goal. But, you know, laying that aside, you know, we are an elected representative state, whether you agree with anyone on housing or transportation, making them known. So the relationships themselves. I would also say, you know, AMC and some of the other associations provide forums that, you know, you already attend. I think that's another good venue to engage with not only your elected representatives to the legislature, but also to the point that Commissioner Uderman made about the Met Council in terms of their impact, in terms of inflow, outflow, infrastructure, what have you. There are a number of transportation subgroups, whether that be through mass transit, which is also the Met Council. But I also say healthcare, as we've talked about, and Heather is intimately involved. There are a number of task forces that are going to be coming online in the next several weeks. Engage with them as well, and we can provide those opportunities to you to let you know when they're coming up. But these topics are not going away, and they are going to be impacting you, to your point about unfunded mandates. It's much easier for a legislator to decide something on behalf of others if they don't have a personal relationship with that person or the leadership of that entity, and know that there's going to be a call or an interaction with them in terms of, help me understand what's going on here. And so I would say, you know, the planning going into 2026 is going to be really incumbent upon engaging with current electeds, current Met Council, current healthcare initiatives, education. You have a very robust educational system in Carver County. Align with them as well, and say, how can we partner between the city, county, and the educational school boards to say what's top of mind for us, and how do we, you know, engage with the Principals Association, with the School Board Association, with, you know, the education establishment, the agencies themselves, and be front facing about it, and find out, what are you thinking about, how does it impact us, and then provide them with articulation in terms of how it would impact you, but also here are some better solutions, or some solutions that we've come to the table with. And I think oftentimes it's not just about saying no and hearing them, it's what can we provide to you in support of solutions that would work better for our cities. And then maybe Courtney has some observations as well.
Yes. Just the only thing that I would add to that is it's much better to make the relationships with folks and to talk to them prior to the session. I know that you have a fabulous legislative breakfast towards the end of the year. Don't wait until then to engage with them. If there's, I know you all know your delegation members, but if there's a member that you don't know as well, that you want to connect with, we're a resource to you. And so we're super happy to, you know, I can call up Lucy Ream and say, let's go grab coffee, and I'll bring Commissioner Anderson, and we'll just connect, talk about life, connect on like our summers, you know, make that relationship ahead of time. and make any asks you can sooner rather than later, so there's more time to build a coalition, bring people together, and move your priorities forward. But do not hesitate to call us, email us. We're happy to help facilitate any meetings or conversations that you need. So I'm sure that's enough for you.
Well, no, that helps. One thing that you mentioned was kind of combining with school districts. So I was a former executive board member of AMSD and also on MSBA boards, both of which do some lobbying. Has AMC, MCIT, or any of our county statewide lobbying efforts ever combined with school districts? So, for example, school-based mental health services is a discretionary fund. I would argue that that's very much an upstream activity. For the money we put into mental health services helps us upstream, and for every dollar we spend upstream, we save $10 downstream. Mm-hmm. So has there been opportunities to lobby arm in arm with some of those other organizations? Has that happened? I know that the school district or the schools, public school lobbying efforts have combined on certain areas. Mm-hmm. But just wondering if that's an opportunity.
Yeah, there are certainly opportunities to work with those groups. I know that AMC in the past and MAXA in the past have partnered with their local, Education Minnesota and AMSD and the School Boards Association. And if that is something that in the future Carver County wants to be a part of those conversations, super happy to help connect. Those are folks that we work with, and we could also maybe at some point in this interim time and this time that we have to get together with folks and to build those coalitions and to build additional relationships. That may be something we want to consider doing, is setting up a meeting with MAXA or, the Social Services Association or AMC, just to say, here are some of the things that we're interested in. Are you working on those? Is there an opportunity for us to support it, or for us to be a county that's leading on an issue? That's certainly something that we could do.
Yeah, I would be, happy, as a former board member for many of those organizations. I still have strong relationships in those areas. So I'd be happy to set up conversations with MSBA or AMSD with ours, because I think that there's a lot of shared interests in that area. I also wanted to see, and you're right, Heather Goodwin is phenomenal in general, and not just because she's in the room, but she's also started me on better understanding some of the legislation that's coming down the road that could have a potential $4 to $7 million impact to Carver County residents. So as far as what's happening with some of those bills, if you could share some of those task force key members on those to develop relationships with, that would be helpful.
Absolutely, we'd be happy to do that. Some of those work groups are still getting formed, but as those come together, certainly happy to share that information with you to help connect if there are members that you're interested in connecting with, and if there's opportunities and openings, come watch for those as well.
All right, thank you so much.
Are not my enemies my friends?
Yes.
Thank you. JP?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for all your help and your input, and the influence and all the lobbyist work is just so beneficial for us. And you talked about our topics, our priorities, and how can we continue to be reactive and adaptive, and definitely by using our staff. We have Lyndon and all the great work that he's done, and then Heather has continued to do phenomenal work. Just a couple of comments. Can you talk briefly about the open meeting law changes that took place just for the group, and then the help that we'll need with our priority setting for 26? I know Commissioner Uderman talked about that, and as we prepare for 26 and we put our legislative priorities together.
Let me just address, I'm not fully versed into the open, changes to the open meeting law, but we will definitely provide that to you in a follow-on. I do think, as Mr. Hemsey has expressed, and you're collecting those priorities from your departments right now, I do think, as Courtney shared, earlier rather than later in terms of preparation and also conveying those to your elected representation in St. Paul, but also to Commissioner Anderson's perspective, sharing those with the school boards, sharing those with the other groups, Met Council, and saying this is where we're going, so that there are no surprises, but also they say, you know, there may be some harmony that you can play with your own priorities, but sooner rather than later on your priorities. I think the breadth of your priorities is important in terms of what your primary objectives are and one of those that you can support. There are a lot of other groups that are also carrying that water, and if you provide those to us, as soon we can identify where those priorities align with other groups, and we can find some synergies and coalitions that we can help build on your behalf as well. So that would be beneficial in terms of moving your priorities forward.
And one of those, Tony's, is District 10, which Carver County is part of that AMC group. And I know Lyndon's been pulled into this. We're starting to have meetings already about the transportation piece to get ready for that special session. So there again, we talked at that board about going on the offensive. And if I recall the numbers right, if it's at 17% now that the counties are getting, do we go ahead and raise that number to 25% or 35%, push back on the state to give counties more? That was just one of the tactics that we talked about from the offensive.
I know that allocation model is a difficult one in terms of having conversations around, particularly with regard to the other stakeholders to that party. This second year of the biennium is the policy side of the year, so it is a non-budgetary. There could be the possibility for a supplemental budget based upon the revenues that we see coming in on a monthly basis. But those comments and that conversation will continue to be had for the sake of what counties believe is a fairer share or a more equitable share between all parties. We're engaged in that, and we're certainly happy to bring those comments that you shared to them as well.
Well, and to that transportation issue, which was a remarkable scheme to pull back $93 million. I think it was 93 at the 17%. I guess the news this week or weekend that the feds are pulling back or taking a much harder look at the transit funding for Northern Express, which I think the legislature kind of used a bunch of that anyway, and the Blue Line and other things. So it might be a good year to go on the offensive, since maybe the Met Council won't need so much money. But if I know them and some of the communities along these light rail corridors, they would gladly raise the Hennepin County tax even higher to pay for it on their own or whatever else. But that was a legislator not too far away from here down in Scott County who remarkably wanted to use that money for the Met Council. And so I think we have an AMC. I have an AMC transportation meeting coming up right away in early August, where they're going to be talking about all that. So, anybody else got a question?
I did want to say one thing. Lyndon, you're phenomenal too. And thank you so much for all the work you do at the legislature.
What about Frischman? He's the only one left.
Frischman's phenomenal. Law enforcement, he's even better.
There's always.
Colin's wonderful. Mark, you're great.
We talk very well and highly of all of you good folks
Thank
when you're
you.
not in the
Thank you.
room. So, but I too want to thank you guys, Courtney and Tony. It really was a remarkable, certainly the Hortman situation. I saved the front page of the newspaper. I think it was the one big word. No, I don't even remember the word, but unfathomable or, and, but we do, for the taxpayers keeping track at home, we do have some headwinds and rough waves ahead, which is why we talk about lobbying and relationships and how we going to do this. I think mostly we could all say, hey, there isn't a real bad idea out there. They passed many of them in 2023, but you have to have money to do these things. And if you're not going to have the money for it, which we found out they didn't, and you do attempt to try to transfer those rather large costs to the taxpayers of Carver County and every other county, then I just explained why we have lobbyists that work on the board and our taxpayers' behalf to make sure that these schemes and good ideas are properly paid for as they forward think about how they're going to accomplish everything from housing and transportation and human services. So I know it wasn't that long ago. We haven't had much lobbying as of not that long ago. And I remember prior boards wondered why the gosh darn do we have to pay for a lobbyist, because it wasn't explainable. And my answer was, well, we can just not have. Everybody else can have a lobbyist, but maybe we shouldn't. It's the way the game is played, unfortunately. I think Paul Haas is having a 50% off sale next year.
Excellent. Glad to hear it.
But
I'm not familiar with that.
But I always feel like a little bit like, and I am a lobbyist, and so I do sometimes feel like I have to kind of explain the way things are, and they've gotten not better. The old idea that very closely won elections and really tight or not at all tight majorities bred a little bit of caution in the legislator and the legislators, and that hasn't been what it is. It's grab and go now, because by golly, we may never be in the majority again. And so Katie barred the door. It's just sort of an odd season, bunch of seasons on the gentleman I spoke about, legislator down in, did he win by 14? Was it officially
Yes.
votes?
That is correct.
Normally a person like that would have a little bit of caution, keep your head down, something, political. It's politics, Nope. It's go for the gold. And I think our lobbyists said, they had a bunch of trophies from 2023 and great reluctance to take them off the shelf and maybe break them. But at the end of the day, this board, I know, unanimously supports a good value in low property taxes and a quality of life. And so somewhere in there, we need the legislature to pay attention to us and our taxpayers. So, but we appreciate everything you do. I could have asked you guys questions all day. How much pot can I have?
2 pounds.
2 pounds, not high enough. So,
I can save you.
oh,
No, if I could, Mr. Chairman, the Minnesota County Attorneys Association hires Paul Haas as well. We work with Nancy Haas very closely. I think our director, Judge Small, he spends all his time down at the Capitol, and so what we do a lot of is it's a lot of education with our legislators about unintended consequences, about how things operate, how they work. And so we meet every month for a board. We don't meet during the summer, but we're really busy and we have a lot of committee work that we talk about laws and really it's the relationships, as you mentioned, and it's a lot of sharing what we do that sometimes is not understood. And that's not a criticism because I wouldn't expect that they know the intricacies, but some of their decisions can have a profound effect upon what we do on a day-to-day basis in the public safety. And so that's what we guard. We try to enhance our public safety at the County Attorneys Association, work with them to come up with some compromises. Candidly, the County Attorneys Association had a lot more influence and I think respect from the legislature in the past. Our voice is not as strong and we've been ignored sometimes. And that's frustrating for us. At least talk to us and try to help us help you as well. So we continue to work with that, but their firm does a great job and Nancy Haas does a great job with us and works really hard at that. And then another comment is, I think what Commissioner Fahey was referencing, the open meeting law, Tony, was the changes for allowing public officials to participate in meetings remotely from any location. And so we've utilized that already. I think that's been really beneficial to allow full participation because other board members, they have. And I think that's the only thing. So, and we went through that process with Administrator Hemsey and with the commissioners. And so they don't have to notify the public of their location. I think that's also a good change because that could be a target for elected officials. And I would imagine maybe that's something that was built into that.
Well, and I think just to maybe augment that comment, if you look at the website at the Secretary of State's office or on the Minnesota Legislature's website, immediately after the events of June 14th, all addresses for all elected officials were taken down to protect, and also for the elections going forward. The Secretary of State, I'm sure, is working on making sure the integrity of the election system is still in place, but to protect the privacy as well as the well-being of those that are willing to step up and act in that capacity. So the outcomes of June 14th, to your very point, are really going to be front and center in terms of how do you provide that privacy, but also the transparency, and the availability to candidates as well as the electeds.
Yeah. And I would add that for the people that are watching as well, that there still is transparency with this change in the law to allow our commissioners to participate remotely. So there are checks and balances to ensure we have a roll call vote, for example. Everybody has to be heard, seen, things like that. And you have to announce that some members may be participating remotely. So I know this board has always wanted to be transparent as well. But this has been a really, I think, a good change about the open meeting law because you'll recall during COVID, how many times could you do it? Maybe three times. They had limitations per year. Now it's more open, so it allows everybody to participate. So thanks for allowing me to make a few comments, Mr. Chairman.
You bet. Mr. Hemsey.
If I could, Mr. Chair, board members, thank you, both to Tony, your team. You got a great team. If you look at this as a sporting analogy, we've talked a little bit about playing defense. That was the name of the game, right? It almost feels like we were protecting what was already existing, in particular with transportation, for example. I looked at that as a raid on what we had, a change in a formula and coming in from various angles, the Met Council and others, which was pretty disturbing, quite frankly, how it came in. Very, very, very non-transparent, right? But good job. Thank you for playing that. But I think, the sobering reality, if we look at the long-term, let's call it a scorecard, keeping on that same analogy. So we look at not only 26, but to 27 and 28, I think we're in trouble if we don't change this game. Because I'm looking at the score sheet here. Heather put this together. You've seen it. $5.6 million added to our base in 27. $5.6 million. That's 7.5% on our levy. That's a fundamental shift in any time in the history that I can remember. That I can look out that far and say, right now, what's in current law? We're not going to blame this all on Courtney and Tony, because not half of this, but maybe a third of this is federal, right? With SNAP,
Right.
the SNAP benefit changes and how we have to take care of that in particular. But I've never seen that before. Tony, you probably haven't. None of us, Tom, that have been here long term. I've never been able to say in current law, we see a 7.5% shift to our base tax. So I think as we talk about strategy, 100%, we need relationships. But I think our legislators get this and they're trying. So I'm hoping the composition of the legislature, quite frankly, changes a little bit because these shifts have now become reality. The African American Family Act alone, that's over $3 million, one piece, right? So sorry to sober everybody up here. It's good to celebrate, right? But I think we got some real work to do, and I think we really need to strategize. And part of the reason I'm talking about this, we got to send this message out. This to me is not, it's not the way the property system was built to function sort of from a philosophical basis. It wasn't meant to take a benefit like SNAP and actually pay for that benefit. We've never done that before, Heather, right? We administrate, but now we're paying for these things. That to me is fundamentally flawed, and that comes out of the federal government, right? But some similar tones with the state, and I think across the state there's going to be some rebelling because of that, and because people understand their property taxes, right? They get them in the mail, and they know where these folks sit. So again, sobering reality. I think we can look at this long term, and I think we have to plan long term more so than we ever have, and continue. It's not only defense. It's kind of like, well, you change this now, you got to undo it, right? This is not going to work without these dramatic shifts. So stay tuned, Tony. Thank you. I think we should get the legislative committee together a little quicker, sooner rather than later. Talk about this and do some reaching out. But again, thanks. Again, back to let's celebrate a little bit. Thank you. I think what was the transportation shift? That was multiple millions would have been lost by us, right? So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Any final words from anybody? If not, I am going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Why don't we get a team photo with everybody?